We're talking today about specific weather preparedness, but there are 3 things that we can do to be prepared for any type of event. So, if I can get there we go. Okay, so the 3 simple things that everybody can do to be ready for an event or for an incident is build a kit, make a plan, and be informed. Very simple, very straightforward, and it can get you ready for any type of disaster. Now, the question of why you need to build a kit. Now, Mary from FEMA was talking about this before. You know, the bottom line is you can't expect that the full weight of the local and federal government will show up at your door the moment that the disaster happens. You may be on your own for a little while. You know, that 72-hour period is a good guideline. Think about what you need to do to take care of yourself while the cavalry arrives. Then basically you need to have enough food and water and other supplies to take care of yourself for 3 days. So the basics, what you want to have in your kit. You want to have water and food, a 3-day supply. Now the guideline for water is basically a gallon per person per day. And that's not only for drinking, but also for sanitation and cleaning up. And then the 3 days of worth of food, think about non-perishable food that's high in calories, so you have energy. So we're talking, you know, power bars and things like that. You want to have radios and batteries. Batteries are the key, and I can't stress enough, the one thing that I'm sure you've gotten over and over is that you have to have a NOAA weather radio. You just can't. It's vital that you have one. So, you know, invest the $30, go to Radio Shack. You know, you will not regret it, I promise you. You also have flashlights and batteries, a toolkit, first aid kit, medications and glasses, cash, cell phone, and charger, okay? Some of the other basics to have, you know, you want to have local maps, personal hygiene items, a whistle in case you're trapped and you need to signal people, a dust mask in case, you know, there's particulate in the air, and important family documents. I used to work for the Red Cross, and I couldn't stress this enough to people. You know, your insurance is only as good as the proof that you actually have it. So you need to have, you know, your contact information for your insurance company, your identification documents, your bank account records. After a disaster, this is the vital information that you're going to need to get your life started again. Some other possible items to put in your kit, you know, if you got a baby, obviously you need diapers and formula. If you've got a pet, you're going to need pet food. You know, a change of clothing, sleeping bag, fire extinguisher, garbage bags, manual can opener. Think about that if you're storing food and it's all in cans, the power might be out. So get the old-fashioned hand crank can openers. Now, the second part of our little triumvirate is to make a plan. So why do you need to make a plan? Once again, our FEMA folks were talking about this before. The chances are when a disaster strikes, your family might not be together. So it's important to figure out how can you contact each other, how can you get back together, and then be prepared for different situations. A good thing to do is to establish 2 local meeting areas. Someplace in your neighborhood, someplace out. So remember the old days in school they'd tell you, okay, well, if you have a fire at home, where are you going to meet? So you meet across the street at the mailbox, and that's still a good thing. If you've got a disaster that happens right at home, you need someplace very close by so you all can rally together. And it's always good to identify an out-of-town contact. What you want to do is have somebody that everybody knows is the person to check in with. And it's best to have somebody who's out of town, out of state. Because if you pick somebody on the other side of town, the disaster might be affecting them too. And sometimes it's a lot easier to call out of an affected area during the disaster than in an area. So what you want to do is everyone in your family, make sure that they all know the person you're supposed to call, you know, is Grandma Joe out in Decatur or wherever. This is a person you check in with, so that person, your out-of-state contact or your out-of-area contact, can be the one to coordinate and say, okay, I know you're at the corner of Randolph and Michigan. You've got somebody else who's out at O'Hare and another person who's just finished classes at Malcolm X. You all need to be able to get to someplace where you can get in touch. One thing to do about your out-of-area contact. Put it in your cell phone as your ICE, your in case of emergency contact. That way, if you're incapacitated and first responders are taking care of you, they can open your phone, find your ICE contact, and let them know that you've been injured and you need assistance. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure everyone in your family knows how to text message. Now I know everybody is all addicted to text messaging now, but there are some people who, older people who might not know about it or know how to do it. The key thing is you can get through with text messages a lot quicker. It takes up a lot less data than a voice call. And when voice calls don't go through, you can get text messages out. I've responded to some very large disasters where you couldn't get a call, but I could have just send out 100 text messages and it gets through without a problem because it is smaller and it doesn't take up as much data space. The other thing to do, when people plan for disasters, generally think planning about home. Okay, what am I going to do if a tornado strikes? What am I going to do if the house starts flooding? You don't spend all your time at home. You got to think about, make your plans based about where you are. Whether you're at school, whether you're at work, whether you're on the road, whether you're at church, wherever you spend a lot of time, you got to think about, if a disaster strikes while I'm here, what can I do? Whether that means having a kit at work, in the car, at home, that's fine if that's what you need to do. But keep in mind, not all disasters are going to strike when you're ready for it. It generally will strike at the most inopportune time. So keep those things in mind. The other thing to think about is the difference between evacuating and shelter in place. In some disasters, you'll be advised that you need to leave. If we have, let's say, a slow rising flood, we've got time to plan ahead, the river's rising, you need to go. Other things, like a shelter in place, a tornado is a perfect example. If you're at home, you need to get to an interior room, you need to get to the basement, that's the safest place to be. That's a perfect example of sheltering in place. You're not gonna run out unless you're in an unsafe area. So you need to know what's the appropriate one to do and have a plan for both possibilities. Some other things to take in mind is make sure in your house you post your emergency telephone numbers. Number for the Poison Center, number for the 311 number to get assistance. And for those of you that live outside the city that don't have access to 311, there's a separate phone number for getting assistance. In some areas it's 211. Post those things, your doctor's number, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is make sure people know the difference between 911 and 311. As somebody who works at the 911 center, this is near and dear to my heart. Our 911 operators are overwhelmed often with people calling for things that are, by definition, non-emergency. Generally, what I try to tell people is, if you're calling to report rats in a dumpster, that doesn't need to go to 911. That's a 311 call. If you got an out street light, that doesn't have to go to 911. That should go to 311. If someone's chasing you, call 911. Usually we don't have people mistakenly calling 311 with 911 calls. People know when they have a 911 call. But unfortunately, if you spend any time, like I have, working the 911 floor and being down there and watching them, it's sad, the number of people who call with non-emergencies that tie up resources for people who are really in desperate need. So that is one campaign that we are working on. I know that that's something big in the mayor's office's heart. So, and then the other thing, talk to your neighbors about how you all can work together in an emergency. We've talked about taking care of yourself, taking care of your neighbors for the first 72 hours. It's something that we don't do a lot, especially in big cities. You see this more in small towns where people are very comfortable with their neighbors. You go over and you shake hands and you talk. I live in an apartment building. I don't think I know anybody's last name. I might know a couple of people's first names. So it's key just to get to know your neighbors. And so what we try to tell people is the time to introduce yourself is not during a disaster. You need to know each other beforehand. Some other things that you want to think about, like I was saying, just make sure you have a plan for home, work, school, anywhere you spend a lot of time. The last step in our little triangle is be informed. You need to know what kind of emergencies you're likely to deal with. So here in the city, we're talking severe weather. We're talking storms, tornadoes, flooding, extreme heat and cold. We're not talking tsunami. We're not talking hurricanes. We're not talking earthquakes. Know what you have to deal with. You can spend a lot of time planning about, whoa, what am I going to do if the asteroid hits? Okay, well, no, let's just focus on what's likely to happen. It's going to be real hot at some point, and you need to know what you're going to do with that. Some other things that are very likely to happen, hazardous material incidents. You know, spend any time on the expressways or looking at what's going up and down the railroads. You see there's lots of chemicals, and that is something that happens a lot in the city, that there are incidents. You know, there may be a case where there is some incident that happens and you have to evacuate your house, or you have to shelter in place because based on what the material is, it may dissipate. But these are things to think about. Transportation accidents, these are things that happen all the time in the city. You know, crime, terrorism, these are the things that are the threats to Chicago that you need to be worried about and think about and plan for. You know, and then you also need to know what you need to do during an emergency. The key thing is to remain calm and patient. You know, listen to the radio and the TV, and if you're working downtown, any building announcements, you need to take in information and get situational awareness, know what is happening. That's the only way that you can know what the right thing to do is to know what the situation that you're in. You know, if you're advised to evacuate, follow the instructions. You know, don't stray from designated evacuation routes. You know, like if we order an evacuation of downtown, you know, the word will be put out through police on the street, through mass media. You want to evacuate down this street. You want to go north on this street, south on this street. You know, don't deviate from that because those other streets will probably be blocked off for police and fire coming in. You know, if you're advised to shelter in place, you know, you want to stay indoors, you want to shut windows, you want to listen for announcements of what to do next. How will you be informed? Radio, we've already talked about it, no weather radio, traditional radio, FM, radio, AM, TV stations, internet, telephone, outdoor sirens that we have for tornadoes, and text messaging. The ways you can be informed, I talked about it before, the Notify Chicago system. You know, back on the table there, you can get information about signing up for it, where you can get real-time text messages, emails, or voice notifications. They'll send you specific things about severe weather, road closings, traffic alerts, local emergencies, special events. You know, you can just go online to alertchicago.com and you can sign up right there. So where can you get more information? Our city website, alertchicago.com, has tons of information about preparedness. Ready.gov that Mary was talking about from FEMA, that is the end-all be-all. That's where all the best information is. All the information we get from Alert Chicago comes from Ready.gov. You can go to redcross.org. Great information there too. And you can always call 311. Once again, 311, non-emergency. They'll help you with this kind of stuff, okay? Don't call 911 to ask, you know, what you should do during a disaster. Okay. Anyway. But thank you all very much.